Good morning, everyone. I think we've now reached 10 a.m. and I'd like to welcome you all to the Audit Committee for today, for this morning, and hope you're all well and thank you for your attendance. So we will proceed first with apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received an apology for absence from Councillor King. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on to item 2, which is a declaration of members' interests. Do members have any declarations at this stage? Obviously, we can do it any time during the meeting as well. Thank you. And then item 3, which is the minutes of the Audit Committee, which was held on the 26th of September 2022. Do I have a proposer and seconder for the accuracy of those? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay. And now we move on to item 4, which is the statement of accounts for 21-22. Obviously, we've already perused these and had our training there too. But I will hand over to Sue Maycock with the latest update on the statement of accounts position. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This report is an update on the statement of accounts and the audit work so far. The next agenda item that you have is a more detailed view of the external audit work that's been undertaken this year so far. So the report includes a statement of accounts as an appendix, and this has been updated since the draft version that you saw in July. In this report, we summarise the changes made to the accounts in paragraphs 1.3 to 1.4, the changes made to the pension fund accounts, and in paragraphs 1.5 to 1.7, those in respect of the county council accounts. In Appendix B on page 267, we list the changes, and in that we differentiate between the changes that we've initiated ourselves as officers and the changes that have been made as a result of the audit work done. And we've also tried to indicate as well the difference between the changes which have actually been accounting entry changes and those which have simply been changes to disclosure notes. You can see that most of the changes have been minor, with the exception of changes to the pension fund accounts as a result of the updated valuations of unquoted assets. And that change has then impacted on the county council accounts, with a significant change made by us after obtaining an updated actuarial valuation of the local government pension scheme. In this report, we also explain the latest position on the infrastructure assets accounting issue. This is about the valuation in our accounts of infrastructure assets such as roads and bridges. Last week, we responded to a second consultation on this issue, and that was specifically a proposed statutory override, which is aimed at allowing accounts to be completed and external audits to be completed as well, whilst a longer-term solution to the problem is being worked on by SIPFA. So the pension fund audit is complete now, and the audit of the main accounts is almost complete, with obviously the exception of the infrastructure assets, which hasn't started. And you'll hear more on the progress of the audit in the next report. And then finally in this report, there's a recommendation that responsibilities for considering the audit completion report for the county council accounts, approving and signing the letters of representation, and approving the final audited statement of accounts is delegated to the Executive Director of Resources in consultation with the Chairman, as obviously these things will happen subsequently. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Sue. Turning to members for questions. Andrew, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There must be many county treasurers would die for a set of accounts like this. It's a very, very sound position indeed. And from the narrow perspective of this audit committee, I'm sure we will have no challenges. But what, if I might be allowed to delve a bit beneath, an underspend on adult social care, given the importance of adult social care services in the context of the whole flow of patients into, out of the NHS, etc., what's the reason for that? Is it because we over budgeted? Is it because we've secured greater efficiencies? Or is it we just couldn't get the staff and therefore provide the services and therefore spend the budget? Because of hospital discharges continues to be a problem for the NHS.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, in the main, the adult social care underspend has been caused by, well, as with the previous year, COVID grants, where we've been able to redirect resources to fund activities. That has been reported through to Council as part of our review of financial performance report in September. So more detail could be found in that report on the various reasons for that. But that's been the case for the past 2 years with adult social care.
Thank you. We will be seeing the Director of Social Services at a future meeting, I suspect, won't we? And I'll save my challenges for there.
Thank you, Andrew. I think the position in terms of the winter months will become a lot clearer by the beginning of February as well, unfortunately, or fortunately. Further questions, anyone? Mark, thank you.
I suppose the Vice Chairman, I ought to ask a question of some sort. Mr Middleton, I think these are a very comprehensive set of reports. There's not a substantial change since we saw them in draft some time ago. And there are explanations that have been given to us for those relatively minor changes. The infrastructure item is still causing some problems, but that applies to everybody, and it applies to the whole process that goes with providing this valuation for infrastructure that's now been placed on us. And there's not an awful lot that we can do, bearing in mind, how late advice comes out, or even requests for, support for various different initiatives in terms of valuing the infrastructure. So I can't see that we can do anything but what's being reported to us by officers. And the recommendations, in my view, seem to be quite sound.
Thank you, Mark. Ian, thank you.
And apologies for being slightly late, Chair. I suppose my frustration is absolutely not with the team, actually, and the accounts. And it's to echo what we've heard before, these are as good as we can possibly get to, frankly. It's the $60 million question that the SIPFA were late to the game. What's the next thing they're going to be late to the game on that we can potentially get a steal a march on? Because they tend to come out slightly surprised, some of these things, and it's a case of why is this a shock? I don't think we are in a bad place, but have we got any inkling what the next big surprise might be that we might get a clue on?
I think the infrastructure assets was interesting because it was through the external audit of Essex County that it came to light, and obviously we've been reporting infrastructure assets for years. So, and it only came to SIPFA's light because it was reported by Essex's auditors. So, obviously took them by surprise as well. Consider infrastructure assets and our PPE are the biggest part of our balance sheet. So in terms of size, they are the most significant. So I wouldn't imagine anything as significant that will be coming to light. They have changes to the code every year. So obviously we've got some changes that we're anticipating and we can plan for those. So things like the leasing and stuff like that. You're asking me to say what doesn't anybody know? I don't know what anybody doesn't know. So, but hopefully the size of the infrastructure assets issue is something that won't be repeated because it is, say, for counties, it's a massive part of our balance sheet. So hopefully not too many things like that coming out of the woodwork now.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you, Michelle. I mean, it's obviously it's a nationwide issue regarding the changes to the code on infrastructure assets, and we will just have to wait and see what the deliberations on that are. There was just one small thing that we did, I think, bring up at the briefing meeting about just looking at pension schemes. Perhaps you could give us a brief explanation, Michelle, about the news perhaps we've heard in recent weeks about the problems with some pension funds, but I think that is specific to those who have, if you like, can't do positive investments. So if you just address that one, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is something that's been discussed at Pensions Committee, and I don't know if Claire's on the call if she wants to add anything to what I'm going to say, but effectively those schemes that are closed SIC schemes, so they've got pension liabilities, but they've not got any new members adding contributions into their scheme, are suffering with some of the swings in the investment market because their investments are their only source of funding the future pension liabilities. Our scheme's obviously not like that. It's an open scheme. We've still got members. We've got new members joining all the time and members contributing. So we can take a much longer view on the liabilities in terms of the liabilities of the members in the scheme, and obviously contributions continuing to be made. So we can take a much longer view on those things. I'm not sure if Claire's on the call or not, but she can maybe add to that in terms of the specific investments.
Hello, yes, I am here. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, as Michelle said, it really is. We're a long-term investor. We've got plenty of active members. We're still cash flow positive. The problems that have been seen with markets over recent weeks have been about liability-driven investments, so where pension funds have taken investments to match their liabilities. We haven't got any of those type of investments, so in terms of the problems that it's caused us, there have been none. We're seeing the volatility in the market that all investors are, but because we're long-term investors, there aren't actually any significant concerns for us at the moment.
Thank you, Claire, for that reassurance. Anybody want to any other points regarding the paper to conclude the figures for the statements of accounts for 2021? No? So we have the recommendations before us. Do I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposer and seconder, please. Thank you, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you, the recommendations, thank you. So we move on, and thank you again to Sue and Claire for those explanations. Move on to item 5, which is the External Auditor's Annual Report and Audit Completion Reports. And we have...
Do you want me to just introduce that?
If you could, Michelle.
So,
yeah, sorry, because I know Andrew has...
So following on from our update from our position on our accounts, we have 2 reports in item 5. So we have the audit completion report for the pension fund accounts and progress report for the LCC account. So I'll just hand over to John first to update on the pension fund. Thank you, John.
Thank you. I'm pleased to report, as you will have read, it's a fairly clean audit completion report in terms of the issues identified. There's been some very minor changes made to the wording of the accounts in liaison with Claire, but the only issue worth commenting upon is the change in the valuations of 21.7 million, and that is inescapable because of the timing of the information coming through, and it will always remain an issue in terms of some of the unquoted investments in the valuation process. So nothing that interesting to report. There is that difference that has been fully adjusted in the revised version of the accounts. And again, I would like to thank Claire and her colleagues for their help and support throughout the course of the audit and for producing a good set of accounts.
Thank you very much, John. And again, thank you to all the staff on behalf of the committee for sort of concluding the figures that we see before us today. Do I have any questions for John regarding the external audit report? No, I'm all happy with that. Well, thank you once again, and the recommendation is that the audit committee considers the completion report and the current findings and identifies any further actions that may be required. I think obviously you know, these things are a bit of a moving feast with the current economic environment in respect of investment, certainly. So obviously the pension committee will be keeping a watching brief on that as the months progress. Okay, well, thank you. So do I have a proposer and seconder for the recommendation, please? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. So if we can now move on to item 6, which is a review and update of counter fraud policies. Michelle.
Just before we move on, John's obviously given you an update on the pension fund. Do you want Mark to give you an update on the LCC accounts? That's fine. Don't worry, we can just skip
I didn't
past
mean
the
to
LCC
counter on
accounts if you
too
like.
Sorry,
Okay,
sorry, Matt.
that's
I
fine.
hand over to Matt. I do apologise to everybody for getting ahead of myself. Thank you.
I'll try and go quick then. The progress report you have from us covers both areas of our responsibilities around the financial statements and our commentary on value for money. The intent here is specifically show that whilst we won't be issuing an opinion by the 30th of November because of the aforementioned infrastructure assets, the work is substantially complete, and the findings from the work today are inconsequential in the whole. So the only bits I'd really draw to your attention is I think it's page 42 of your pack. 42-43 sets out the status of the audit, where they are. In particular, I just look at the green. The items that are within the control of the authority as officers and us within the audit will be completed within the next few days. But significantly, the main areas that are stopping us are the ones that are outside the authority's control and outside our control. We've mentioned infrastructure assets, which we don't think will be resolved until, delightfully, the 25th of December. And then we're also waiting for finalisation of what's called instructions on something called the whole of government accounts. We haven't received those yet, so we just cannot carry out that work. The consequence is a peculiarity in the legal framework for issuing our work, something called the certificate. And we can't issue the certificate to confirm that the audit year of 2021 or 2022 is complete until we've carried out that piece of work. It's normally fairly routine in nature, but until we are told what to do, we can't go off and do that. To be perfectly honest, that's really as far as I would go. You will get a supplementary report which pulls everything together, confirming all of these, where we've got to on everything. I'm not expecting any fundamental changes apart from the infrastructure assets, and that's just too big a topic to be able to enable us to conclude. Adjustments in the accounts are pretty minor. Control recommendations are, again, comparatively, when I look across the entire portfolio of organisations I work with, pretty minor. The authority's done a good job again. Happy to take questions on that or the supplementary report that's in there.
Thank you, Matt. Members? Just while other people sort of gather their thoughts, regarding the COVID grants testing, and we say you're waiting for further evidence and responses about the sums, including both within the CIS and the grant note disclosures. I mean, generally, you wouldn't be highlighting any particular issues there.
No. All of those areas are just top and I'm going to call them top and tail type information that will come through, and none give us any particular concern over. I'll never say never, but I don't anticipate any unusual or scary findings out of anything that's left to do.
There are a lot of the problems with COVID grants have been on a national basis rather than a general, well, more on a national basis than on a local one. Andrew, thank you.
I was going to ask a question on that subject in the counter-fraud section, but as you've raised it, Chair, because, yeah, we hear national stories of fraudsters going wholesale on the new type of, let's say, minimal check grants that Mr Sunak thought up. And yet, in the counter-fraud report, we see no evidence of that. It's the usual suspects of bank mandates and expenses and so on. Is there no evidence of anybody trying to scam or defraud through COVID grants or any other grants?
I mean, we can pick that up, I think, better in the counter-fraud progress report, but just to give some context, there were some robust checks within the process, but also there are, as I say, Gary will pick up the work and the outcomes of that counter-fraud work on the grant, so we have done some work on that, if that's okay.
Well, and that's a very assuring answer. If you anticipated it, put in robust checking mechanisms, and therefore you headed them off at the pass.
The council made that decision to do some active, proactive work and also preventative and detective work, but Gary will go, unless you want to pick it up now, Gary. So.
I'm happy to pick it up now. Over the last 18 months, we've reviewed grants that have been issued. We've made testing in the areas of those grants, looking at the applications that have been made. As a result of that, one of our investigations at the moment is to do with a grant application that was made by an individual, and that has been reported to the police. I think in our last report we mentioned that that was in excess, for as this council was, of attempted fraud and fraud in the value of about £300,000. We reported that to Lincolnshire Police, and that is now been extended by the police into other counties.
I was just going to say, in the context of our accounts, the work that Mark's probably referring to is how we've accounted for the grants that we've received for the work that we've been doing. So the extra costs and the particularly around the public health, which, as I say, was part of the underspend around the adults. So it's just about making sure we've accounted for all of that correctly. Quite a lot of the grants to individuals will have gone through the district councils. We did have our own business grant scheme that was running at the beginning of COVID, which is what we've just referred to. But as I say, the big chunk of money in our accounts is for grants for our costs.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Michelle. Obviously, that's very informative. Any further questions to Mark? And
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just reassured that we've been able to help the people we should help, and furthermore that the monies have gone out to those people and we won't be handing any back. That is because Lincolnshire funding is quite hard fought for at the best of times, and thanks very much, team, for ensuring that's the process. Thank you.
Can I just pay my personal compliments to both sets of teams for a very dull set of reports, because as an accountant I like dull, because again it takes a lot of work to make it dull and to get to that point of completing it and getting it all done. But actually I think that's actually a massive success, and again in my time here now it's getting more and more regular that is a case, which is again to the point about giving assurance. Actually things come up, they're dealt with very well, they're planned, they're advanced. Of course things go wrong, but actually they're managed from both sides particularly well, so congratulations on Dull.
thank you, Ian. I'm sure we'd all reiterate Ian's comments. So members, any further questions over me trying to push this along far too quickly initially? So I think we'll have to revisit the recommendation, as Mark quite correctly pointed out to me. So we have the recommendation in front of us. If I could have a proposer and seconder, thank you. And all those in favour, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So if we can now please move on to item 6, which is the review and update of the counter board procedures.
Thank you. Good morning. So these are a set of policies and our strategy to fight fraud and maintain our the council's strong commitment to fighting fraud. So they're being presented to the committee for feedback and approval, given your key role in the governance arrangements around fighting fraud, making sure that they're effective. So the paper sort of sets out the context, how they fit in, the arrangements for whistleblowing, anti-fraud and corruption, and anti-money laundering. So hopefully you would have found them clear and concise and easy to read. They are provided to set out the framework in which the council operates, its counter-fraud arrangements and whistleblowing arrangements, etc., plus how they should be reported. And I propose the policies to you for approval and feedback. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lucy. Questions, members? Please, to Lucy. Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. The existing policies and strategies obviously stood as well in the past. What are the significant changes that have been put forward, or is it really just a question of updating in relation to, you know, background documentation and background advice, or is there anything significant that's been introduced into the proposed policy and strategy revisions?
I can confirm that they've not been significantly updated. They are based on best practice, and the team has benchmarked those against the CIPFA code for fighting fraud. And if there's anything that's through the network that we feel should help our policies, then we do update them. But we, as you say, had strong policies in place, so there's not been any significant changes.
Could I just follow up then? So on that basis then, you know, the very good and tried and tested results that we get out of the current guidances will continue to be the case, if not better.
But we're always looking to continually improve. So yes, we look at and benchmark against policies and any sort of lessons from other councils, and the next paper sort of shows how these policies work in practice and the outcome from that. And as we say, we raise awareness, and that's one of the key aspects of a counter-fraud policy and framework, is getting the message out there together with the fraud risk assessment and assessing that. Again, those key practical applications of the policy will be coming to the committee later.
Chairman, could I just ask one more? Are there any resource implications in relation to these enhancements? Or do you feel that we've got the resources needed at the moment and that will continue to be the case in the future?
We always review the existing resources like any part of the council's business, so we make the best use of the resources available to us. So we're looking to strengthen the team through apprenticeships and through training, and working more smarter with the internal audit team. So there will always be opportunity to strengthen the team, but there is only so much the council can afford. And like any part of the business, I go through that same consultation process around and assess that. But I think that is a real valid question for the committee to raise. And what we have coming to the committee in March is the plan for the counter-fraud and proactive work. So again, that sort of sets out the resources involved within the team. So the council does get a very good return for the work that the team does over the years. But I can't say that you could always have more resources in counter fraud.
Thank you. I just really would like to say how easy I found them to read, and that was great pleasure to me, because quite often these things can get tedious, you can get bogged down, but I felt that you could read those very simply and go back if you needed to get further information. So I found that very good. Thank you. So quite happy to propose them.
Steve, thank you. Ian.
Thank you, and as you guys know, I'm the first to critique. These are great, absolutely great. I'm with Councillor Allen. It does feel a bit Groundhog Day that we're forever asking the same question about resourcing, we get the same answer. We know we can get more, we get great value, etc. And that's the $60 million question really for the council. The only tweak potentially I suggest on page 297, and this is just purely from personal horror stories, is that we've got named individuals on there. So when you go to policies, if you do accidentally leave or anything moves around, sometimes that gets a bit hard to track because they'll make contact and they've already gone. So if you're looking, we've already got the whistleblow email in there, we've got the other stuff in there. If you've got named individuals, and this is policy, it's just baked in. So it just maybe things to just have a think about, but I think they're fantastic.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the points Ian made is quite valid. Any quality management system, you want posts in rather than names. But I really am heartened with the fact that it's not a dusty policy. It's coming out. It's being refreshed. It's being looked at. We've got our assurances by Lucy that we're having apprenticeships. So hopefully we've got succession planning within that as well. And quite frankly, I can't see any more they can do. Thank you.
Just one question for me, if that's okay. Looking at the money laundering policy, this is a minefield for lots of businesses, and particularly in the financial sector. I'm just sort of want some reassurance on the training provided to the staff regarding identifying something that ought to be reported through the money laundering report form, etc. And obviously, I presume you direct the first person that would be aware of that would be Matt Drury. Lucy, I'm just looking about how staff are actually aware of this on the ground and what sort of where this features in the training, because it is extremely complicated.
So we do need to refresh the training for the sort of money laundering officer, because one is myself and another, the officer, Matt, has left. So we are looking to refresh that. But also underpinning that, areas of the most risk, even though the council is low risk overall, have their own practical policies, and we've been talking, so for example, economic development, that has a practical policy underneath that. So they've recently updated their guidance, and they then go through that training with them in terms of how do they implement it in practice. And I think Gary's also been talking to that individual in the past week, so it's quite timely. So we have that sort of regular contact, that regular engagement with parts of the council, but we do need to have a refresher training for the core officers who have to do that reporting. And the reporting is so infrequent, it is if you don't use it, you lose it, because we don't have many risk areas within the council's business.
So, and it'll be you're and identifying where your most likely exposure is, which is likely to be on contracts, because of the do you do? I take it you do DBS checks and everything on people that you contract with, do you, Lucy? I mean, it's getting a bit specific, but
within each part of the business, they would have done the risk assessment against identity theft. So obviously legal and areas where they do those high value transactions will have those appropriate checks. I can't comment on the actual detail of those level of the checks. The policy sort of sets out what's expected and the key areas of exposure, and as I say, we do training through those individual areas which do need refreshing in my role and my deputy, but the actual areas, they have their own practices to apply to how that policy is then translated into practical steps of what needs to be done in the procedural side. But I can follow up to get that assurance back to you explicitly, because as I say, that's really down into the detail.
Be helpful at a future date, just so we can see that training has actually gone through and those procedures have been updated. Because so it is one of those things that it is very complicated, but to actually to work through as a employee, particularly if you're middle ranking, you're not taking the huge holistic picture, which sometimes those situations can be identified by staff who probably aren't at such a senior level. So, thank you. Okay, any further questions, gentlemen? No?
Thank you, Chair and members. I'd like to present the Counter Fraud Progress Report, which covers the period 1st of April to 18th of October. And I've put in this report that the key areas, the risks of fraud remain high, and we actually continue to promote vigilance on how fraud can occur, raising awareness to staff on a regular basis. We also are part of the National Anti-Fraud Network, in that we receive information from that network on a regular basis, in fact probably every Friday of every week at the moment, where we alert staff about the risks and trends that affect the council. I'm the person who's recently updated the counter-fraud, whistleblowing and anti-money laundering policy, and I'm actually the Deputy Anti-Money Laundering Officer as a result of Mr. Jury leaving. We've recently also seen an increase in the number of direct mandate fraud. Mr. Middleton mentioned that earlier. We've had probably 4 or 5 in the last 3 months that have occurred, and we have in place with Serco Master Data Team a protocol alert system, in that every time we get attacked with our bank details being asked to be changed, my team are alerted directly, and as a result I actually liaise with Lincolnshire Police if I feel that these are matters that should be raised to them straight away. So we have a system in place to prevent that fraud occurring to us. As I say, we've so far in the last 3-4 months prevented £1 million worth of potential fraud against the council. We have currently 8 cases that we're dealing with, which are complex and sometimes take significant resources, as Councillor Allen has just mentioned. So we are aware of the amount of work that we get against the amount of people that we have to do that work. I've also been continuing our awareness work in 2022-23 to promote knowledge and understanding of fraud, and how have made progress with this, in that we now have, from this month, we'll have a new counter-fraud hub which will be launched, and within that we'll also have training for staff on the areas of fraud and how to prevent it, how to understand what fraud is being made against the council. And also within that is also the money laundering requirements, so that staff will understand where they need to go, who they need to speak to. This is centralised in the whistleblowing telephone number goes direct to myself or another member of the counter-fraud team on our laptops, so we get all calls from the whistleblowing line for anybody that wants to speak to us. That also covers the 7 district councils, so we provide that service as well. I will leave that open to any questions.
Gary, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. You touched upon it when you responded to this item earlier on, particularly the case of a £300,000 fraud that you were involved with. Do you get all the support that you need from the police in terms of bringing these cases that have been identified to conclusion? you mentioned that they have expressed an interest and they seem to be looking at similar sort of situations that might be occurring outside our county. But does that mean they are actively pursuing these things and it's actually going to result in some sort of proper criminal, case and court appearance or whatever? And does that apply generally to the cases that you're involved with, or do they take a view that unless it's lots of money, they're not really interested? And does that leave you then, solely with a sort of civil response in terms of actually trying to get any form of redress? Because we do hear some difficult stories at the moment in terms of what the police seem to want to be involved with, which almost seems to be as little as possible, and whether they do consider this thing to be a proper crime.
I'll come back to you on that in all the matters that we've reported are being investigated by the police. We had a case recently where the Crown Prosecutor made a decision to take no further action, and I actually appealed against that. So, as you say, are they taking it seriously? I think fraud, if you read, is 50% increase in the country since COVID, and it's in fact the highest crime in the country. And the resources of police, if you look at Lincolnshire Police, I think there are 4 officers in the fraud team of Lincolnshire that actually investigate fraud. So we do have good cooperation from them. I think the issue, as you say, is whether it goes to the full extent of being prosecuted.
I should have made it clear that I'm talking about the criminal justice system as a whole, I suppose, and it's not just the police involved, it's the CPS and the courts. And the CPS and the courts are maybe even under greater pressure than the police in terms of how they use their resources. So is there anything that that can be done to done to encourage, should we say, the whole process to actually take this matter more seriously, or is it left then to people such as yourself simply asking for a review of a case or whatever it is if it doesn't seem to be going in the direction that we need? Because I mean the outcome of the whole exercise to a certain extent is to actually get some redress, I suppose, if at all possible, but to encourage others not to be doing the same sort of thing.
I'm part of the counter-fraud work that we do. I'm part of the multi-agency intelligence network, which is run by Lincolnshire Police. So we have good relationships there, and over the last 18 months I've set up an understanding with them that we will report a crime to them. And one of the biggest things is that you need to put together a package for them of evidence, and that's one of the things I've tried to do with our team, is actually train them in gathering evidence so that we can go to the police with a case that's fully prepared, so they don't need to actually reinvestigate it.
Thank you, Mark. Andrew, and then Ian. Thank you.
Part of the assurance that an audit committee gets is the systems and controls, but a major part of it is the leadership that develops the culture, that is constantly alert and vigilant, and I'm getting a very strong assurance on that, Chair. I think it's often said that leadership is the critical factor in any reliable system, and I think we've had a demonstration of it here. It may be the blaggers are too busy in the metropolitan areas and they haven't discovered Lincolnshire, but I don't think that's likely to be the case. They probably think Lincolnshire is an easy touch, but what we've heard today suggests it's not.
Thank you, Gary. Some good stuff going on. Really is some good stuff going on. Could I ask a favour or request? And it ties into actually what Councillor Allen was saying, but also just something you've mentioned on page 333, which is 340k potentially might be recovered. I'd like to get a view of when we've put a case in and we're anticipating recoveries, it will then take time, and that gets lost in terms of reporting over time. So we're anticipating getting what our total exposure was. Within that, there's the amount that we recover, and then there is the bit that we actually do get back. Because if that does drag on for years, what happens is it goes off. So I can't say that we said, you know, in 2 years' time, we said we might get up to 340k back of losses. That related to 340k of a 340k exposure, but we ended up only getting 20k back. I'm just trying to see what this pattern is, because to Councillor Allen's point, part of this is if the wins are there and we're not getting it back, that's not really an incentive to people stop doing it. If we actually get a lot back, but it takes a bit of time, then the council knows that's fine, but we will hunt it down. It's also part of the storytelling to go back to the police that says, look, this is the size of the prize. You know, you're dragging it on, and then it's a CPS, then it's the courts. If we're leaking, you know, we're stopping huge amounts of money. But if it only takes one big hit and then we're not likely to get it back, that's a direct cost to us. So I think for me, visually, I'd like to understand the history of what we said we were going to get back and actually what we've got back. And that's part of the reporting, just in part of this, because it just comes through.
We pull that together more in the annual report. So we do get that, the total recoveries, but we can also emphasise that we obviously do active proceeds of crimes and recovery depending on who the instigator is. So we absolutely do seek redress through either from their assets, from if it's an employee, it will be the pensions, all sorts. So we do that, and we do report that quite clearly. Is that what you mean?
It's just I'm trying to drag it in, but also trying to see our success rate and the delay is what I'm looking at. I know we do this. That's not the point. I think the question I'm trying to say is if we're doing a report on here that is the effectiveness of counter fraud, it needs to be in here, not just in the annual report, and it needs to be showing how well we've done over time. So I know we go after things, but again, some of that stuff is actually not down to us as well. So I think it's just trying to paint that overall picture that we can see how well it's working. This is not a negative for the counter fraud. This is actually saying this is what we're trying to actually, this is the context in which it's operating. And I'd just like to say, I'd just like to see it a little bit in here if this is what we're reporting, if that's okay.
Further questions to Gary and Lucy? Just from the chair, obviously when we say about taking cases further, we generally mean, Gary, criminal cases. We don't take on any civil cases, or it's generally through the CPS.
We are talking about criminal cases. We haven't taken on any civil cases.
But those, I mean, from an employee fraud point of view, sometimes that wouldn't necessarily end up with a criminal case, but it would end up with severe consequences for the employee, presumably.
It depends on the circumstances. Obviously, we have a couple of cases at the moment. There are ex-members of staff that have been disciplined and dismissed, and we have reported to the police because of the loss to the council.
So I think what the committee and the council and our public can be assured of is that these cases will be pursued vigorously, and that should be a fair warning to the people who are considering committing a fraud in the first place. Thank you.
Every meeting I go to where we discuss a case, I make the point of zero tolerance to fraud on behalf of the council. So I have a number of cases at the moment where I'm saying to the service areas, you know, if there is evidence of a fraud here, we will report it, and we will ensure that we take that to the full extent.
For those assurances, Gary, and thank you for all your team's hard work. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. We have the recommendations, members. Can I have a proposer and seconder, please? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. So if we can move on to item 8, which is the internal audit progress report. Lucy, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm pleased to provide the Audit Committee with an update of the internal audit work completed. So if I take you to page 349, I'll start bringing out the key messages and then open up to questions. So you can see that the work of the team is predominantly positive, substantial assurance. There's one area of limited assurance around Transport Connect. I can also give assurance that the recommendations associated with that report have been implemented, but we have the Assistant Director online if there's any particular questions you want to explore with them. But as I say, the report was issued early in the year. It's been presented to the committee now as part of your work plan to provide assurances where the council has trading companies, to give you an insight of the governance and assurance framework there, again giving you that transparency. So there's a number of reports in draft, and they're shown, and then over the page we have really some key updates, which again I would draw to your attention around what work that we're going to have in terms of the future, in terms of the revised plan that we undertook in September. So that shows you the key additional works and other key areas of work that we're going to be doing in the next 6 months. But I suppose the real key message is around capacity and staffing. So I've provided you with an update on our recruitment process and also how we've strengthened our delivery at all levels within the team, from apprenticeship to senior auditors. I'm really pleased that has gone well, and that will help give the team some long-term stability. Again, the head of internal audit post has been out, and interviews are being held this week. And obviously, Michelle could give you some update on that if as appropriate once the process has been terminated. So in terms of staff changes, we do have one step forward and perhaps one step back. So we have an audit manager. One of the key things within our services is to grow and support the profession. So we do train, and we are seen as exemplars. So it's not surprising that as part of that grow on our own and ensuring people's career thrive, that we do lose some people along the way. So the audit manager resigned and has left the council. We have the recruitment process closed yesterday, so we'll be again looking to seek a recruitment for the audit manager and a further principal, because the support from the director and through the assistant director is to help us get on the front foot of our recruitment as we grow our own. So we are looking to increase capacity, both in the IT area, but also around quality assurance and performance. So the practice maintains that high quality and exemplar reputation throughout its delivery model. So I think hopefully that's given the committee some of the key messages. The report goes along in providing a bit more detail around outstanding recommendations, but overall it shows a strong internal control environment, a strong support for the internal audit work, and that the internal audit team are still focusing on the key areas that matter to provide independent assurance. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Lucy. Andrew and Ian, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Unalloyed good news about the staffing situation, Lucy. And I'd invite you to expand upon it a little. A couple of meetings back, one of your colleagues said you'd adopted a different recruitment strategy. You'd gone broader with your perspectives, and it was core curiosity and alertness to potential wrong things. Is that a factor in the success with the recruitment? But I'm also assured that you are regarding a grow your own strategy as a core part of your people strategy. And in that respect, I would urge you monitor very closely through appraisals, reviews, etc., exit interviews if people do leave for progression, which is a good reason to leave, because we've asked for years, you know, why do you keep telling us you've got capacity problems? Well, it seems you've turned a corner there. And have you learned all the lessons that can be learned to ensure that this is sustainable? And the second one, if I may, the transport issue, fascinating read, that one, clear clash of cultures. Very pleased you prevailed, Lucy, with your expectations on that. But question there is there more that can be done at an earlier stage with subsidiary activities such that they don't start as a family feel business and they take time to come into the rigour of local government finance?
That was quite a lot of discussion comments, so hopefully I'll respond to the two areas. So in terms of growing our own, the different approach was successful, because one of the key things that we were finding was the attributes around professional curiosity, some of the leadership skills that you acquire within the role and the emerging role. And that was definitely, we've appointed a couple of seniors that had equivalent academic achievements, but we would need to train more in terms of the audit process, where the steps that you go through, and they are really shining and thriving and adding value to the team already, so that's really good. The apprenticeship, we're having 4 of our team joining the apprenticeship. Again, that usually takes 2 to 3 years, so they grow and get, again, with our team we have a very mixed and professional team. So again, they'll get real good grounding in the internal audit profession. So that starts in January. There's a key support. Myself have been coaching, for example, on report writing, risk identification. So we're all helping and supporting to maintain those skills and experience. But more importantly for us, it's the next step to the profession in terms of that agile assurance, and particularly on the key risks and projects. So that has been a success, but we don't also miss training our existing staff. So there's got continuous development through our skills matrix. So we have a career grade that starts at entry level and at school leaver level, if you have no qualifications, so that you can actually then step into the apprenticeship. So we're doing everything we can to support that going forward. We're looking to work with our finance colleagues, again, to pull together the graduates. So we're coming at every angle we can to tap into the workforce market. On the Transport Connect side, the council only has one operating really a trading company. There's been some recent guidance around that from SITFA that came out in May. So any new trading companies will be looking at setting up on that sort of best practice model, and that's been shared widely by Assistant Director Michelle, so Grady, in terms of wider around the governance structures of the council. But we've not got a lot of companies within Lincolnshire. And obviously Nicole can comment on the governance structure and the reporting structure more than I, if you have any further questions.
What you said. No. Okay.
we'll proceed in any event, and perhaps Nicole can join us in a little while. Yes, Ian, I do apologise, thank you.
No problem, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, to interrupt. I have been here all along, but unfortunately the sound and picture keeps disappearing, so I can't hear any questions that are coming to me.
Okay, Nicole, we'll have to, thank you. We can see you, can you hear us?
I can now, thank you.
That's lovely, okay. Andrew,
I asked a question, Nicole, about the rigour of subsidiary companies in respect to financial systems, audit, etc. And it's a fascinating read on the transport scenario, but you got there and it's in a good shape now. Lucy assured us you don't have many subsidiaries, but if you do have a new trading company set up, there's a new set of for standards for such activities, and those will be put in from an early stage to ensure that we don't have a repeat of the transport situation. Is that correct?
It'd probably be helpful if I just rolled back a little bit in with regards to Transport Connect. Obviously set up in 2015-16 for a very specific set of urgent circumstances. So I did hear the comment about the clash of culture, which I take on board and accept, because there is a clash. It's a commercial business. You know, it doesn't have to comply with the same rigours as a local authority, because actually it is determinedly independent. That said, it still does have very, very significant financial oversight through Right Vigor, who provide the internal audit controls, etc. And I think it's really important that the request to have audit come in was by me. I asked for audit to come in. It wasn't part of an expected or routine plan of the annual audit review, because the company was moving into its next phase. It was never intended that this company would be have a long life. It was for a very specific set of circumstances which were expected to be managed by the market. That didn't happen. And therefore it was timely to have audit come in and look at the governance model and the governance board setup. I feel they went a little further than I anticipated with that, and hence the reason that the board themselves were kind of quite so assertive in their pushback. But I think for yourselves, what's really important to hear is that this was done some time ago. All of the actions that were identified had already been addressed or identified ourselves by the board, and all have been put in place. The other bit I would also want to respond to, because I believe it came up in the pre-scrutiny meeting, is the line about using your own laptop. Yes, that's true, we do, but just to be clear, no confidential information was ever shared in that way. What we wanted to do was introduce a platform that would provide all of the mitigations and risk assurance about an individual's laptop being corrupted or having malware, etc. But to be absolutely clear, no confidential information was ever shared in that way in the first place.
Thank you, Nicole. That's good background. Thank you.
Ian.
Thank you. Yes, so Lucy, just one point on context and one question, if I may. One on the recruitment side. Recruitment at the moment is horrific, full stop. And again, financial services, everything finance sector, internal audit, everything's being held to full notice periods. People are moving around quite a lot. There's a lot of golden handshakes. And it's not only just trying to bring people in at the right price, actually what they're asking for, there's the halo impact on everybody else that you've still got as well in the team. So again, we've talked about this before. Growing your own is absolutely the best way of doing this. Looking more broadly, opening up, absolutely the right strategy. My question is around on page 358, and it's partly aimed at Lucy and partly aimed at the business. And the second bullet point requires retention. 1/3 of the servers on 2003 or 2008. If I went to my Chief Information Security Officer and told him that about my platform, I think he would resign instantly. A, to get to that point, and B, they're out of support. They are ridiculously easy to be hacked. I know we've got a lot of protection around them. 1/3 of your architecture on very old servers is a very interesting question for me. Yeah. Not only in terms of the assurance level we can give, I appreciate there's protection around them, but actually just how the estates got to that point without the reinvestment. So I think that's, I know, in classic terms, mic drop territory or Columbo question, whatever you want to call it. I think the exposure, I think, is greater than it perhaps articulates in there. I'm more concerned this is maybe a question more for corporate services and IT, how we got to that point.
I can't fully answer that. I think what you have coming to the committee and has had in the past, the combined assurance, you've had the executive director here to give an account of some of the challenges. You have a lot of intelligence around how this risk has moved in terms of incrementally getting better, but there's always been acknowledgement that there's still work to do through the strategic risk register and the combined assurance. So this is again giving you that continuous message around things are moving, but there is still that level of exposure. But again, it's wrapped around some other compensatory controls to help monitor and oversight on that. But I can definitely ask the appropriate IT manager to attend the next committee as part of the combined assurance report to you, which wraps up everything for February, I think it is. But
Chair,
it has been to the committee in the past.
Chair, would you mind? I'd specifically like to, if the
yes,
committee is...
I would think that would be a very wise move that we do pursue that. I know we don't want to... we want to know that is being addressed because
absolutely,
because it is.
It's not a witch hunt. It's the answer is actually for me. Yeah. If I got that information, I'm really I'm looking for assurance to say how big your exposure is this, what information's on there in terms of architecture, how vulnerable are these servers, etc.
We might have to. I mean, looking at Lucy at the moment. I mean, in terms of getting into much detail, Lucy, we might have to have some of that on pink papers, will we? We definitely will have to have some of that on pink papers, yes. Yeah, I mean, it is that's part of the overall IT strategy. It's really important. Yeah, we will bring that back in February, Lucy, and so, but it will be a lot of that will be in confidence, of course. Okay, thank you. Paul, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to go back to this paper on 371 with loads of red on it. I went to the LGA conference and I sat at the SIF for a little seminar, and there were people from another council that sat up and said they'd lost control of their trading companies. So at one point, now obviously company house rules say that you should be in charge at all times. So I'm seeking assurances going through this that the people have been in charge all the time, even though some of the paperwork has not been up to spec. Also, I think because they basically only have one customer and they are tied to contractual issues, surely to goodness that would actually bond the members of the board to a certain way of acting. So yeah, I'm just seeking some reassurances round that the control of the company has not been lost at any stage. It seems that nobody knows their roles and responsibilities. Assurances, that's definitely put right, and we've been compliant to the Company Act throughout. Thank you.
I think obviously Nicole's given you an update on the governance arrangements, and although the council has freedom and flexibility, there's been other oversight functions to ensure that the company is well run. But I'll hand over to Michelle, and then obviously if Nicole wants to come back, but hopefully the responses already have been giving you that assurance that the company's governance structure is effective.
So just for some context, and some of the work the Audit Committee will be doing will be looking at some of the lessons learned from some of the other authorities that have issued Section 114 notices and things. And a lot of that has been on the back of trading companies that seem to have gone a bit rogue, might be a bit of an exaggeration, but they don't seem to have had the controls in place that they should have done. But TCL is our only operating trading company, and Nicole's just kind of set out that was set up under some kind of unusual circumstances, but it's been very much managed and overseen by LCC and by the board since its inception back in 2014-15. My team get to see regular reports from Rights Vigar, who are the accountants for that, and the decisions around things like the purchasing and the financial exposure for the company are managed through our oversight as well. So I think we've got good oversight of TCL. They are our only operating trading company. And any business case for any other trading company would come back through the council for any kind of decision making around their remit and the governance of those. So we're not exposed in the way that a lot of authorities seem to be with things like housing companies and things like that. So just to provide some assurance that we've got good oversight of TCL, the board obviously taken on board the recommendations around the governance, but Nicole, obviously a member of the board and also an LCC officer, and I say my team also support in terms of some oversight on the financial aspects.
So there's been no chance of losing control throughout, so we have been compliant with the Companies Act. That's basically what the question was.
As far as I'm aware, yeah, we're filing reports and accounts as we should be. We've got 2 dormant companies, and obviously the Director of Commercial was part of the directorship of that, so that's all shifted now over to Andrew Cookham, from what I understand, but they're dormant as they stand, so they're not operating. So as far as I'm aware, they're fully compliant with the Companies House requirement.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, it's my understanding through the highway scrutiny, which this comes to on a quarterly basis, that obviously by God, chartered accountants actually, provide the source information so that the Companies House commitments and everything are fulfilled. But obviously, this generally, the criticism here relating to other risk management processes really, and the Data Protection Act, which we have been assured have now been addressed, and that is really important too. There's one other, and I presume, Michelle, the company is subject to corporation tax, or is it not? You don't know?
I think I'd probably have to check on the detail of this, but there is because TCL are a tackle company, which effectively means that they trade predominantly with us, there is some specific tax situation in place that's approved by HMRC.
Chair, if I may come back in as well. That's okay. Just to be clear, once again, there was no breach of data protection at any time. The query was about the use of personal laptops and whether the company should be investing in the board members, non-executive directors having laptops provided by TCL, but no confidential information was ever shared. The other thing is that the company we aren't their only customer, that they are required to find a minimum of 20% of their business from other kind of commercial and market organisations. And then just for the staffing, just to give you an understanding of the profile, there's a commercial director and there's a managing director. So actually the profile of the staffing is very, very small. I meet with them on almost a weekly basis, and at no time has this company ever looked like, felt like, or been out of control. It's too small, it's too closely connected to us, and we have far too much oversight. Plus, within my team, there is an owner representative who is dedicated to working alongside the TCL company. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, but I'm sure you and your team would appreciate that these questions have to be asked at whatever size the organisation happens to be, and I'd like to reiterate that. Thank you, and thank you for your help. Members, any further questions? No? Thank you. So we have the recommendation on the paper. Do I have a proposer and seconder? Thank you. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. And if we could then move to the work programme. As detailed, and obviously addressing Ian's point earlier on, we will be requesting an update regarding the issue we discussed on the counter forward progress report, etc. So, thank you. And in terms, but in terms of the IT systems maintenance specifically, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. So the paper aims to address the future work of the committee. You see that we are looking to move forward the training and development. So we have in late October received the updated guidance on SITFA on the practical guidance, which I will be sharing a bit of light reading for you. So there's some good resources there that we're looking to have that interactive workshop. So an email went round to give some suggested dates. Unfortunately, because of the timing of that, it's hard to get us all together because the audit committee training is mandatory and it is good for that interaction. So we try to do two things. One, do the self-assessment that helps inform your annual report. And to obviously give you some awareness around the new guidance plus horizon scanning. So we're looking to reschedule that sometime in January and February. So apologies that you're going to get another email, but it just didn't work out because of the timing and the full committee structures that you have, that we could get that sorted. So that will be coming out in a couple of days to sort of schedule that together with a copy of the guidance. Now the guidance does include some self-assessments and impact analysis again, which we can work through. So it is good guidance, but it is quite lengthy. So maybe a couple of extra months time to read it might help, but it is there. So the other thing in terms of work plan that I'm looking to update you with was the outcome of the initial meeting with the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. And obviously I can hand over to the chairman to give that, but again it's just giving you a highlight of the key actions that agreed. So it was early days, early conversation, but there was some sort of agreed actions that we can take forward. And again, some of that might be around that joint working that we've done in the past around the outcome of financial resilience and public interest. So that again will be looked to be implemented into your future work plan. So the emerging risks, we were hoping to have the strategic risks and risk register updated, but I haven't got anything particular to report at this time. And then obviously Appendix B sets out the tracker of agreed actions, again giving you suggestions for future agenda item. So I've noted the existing risk and issue around the IMT to bring to your work plan, but the next year's work plan or next committee is the combined assurance and the annual report, and plus potentially something on the accounts. I'll have to defer to Michelle on that one.
Thank you, Lucy. Just an update on the... we have scheduled in 4 more meetings, Mark, haven't we? With overview and scrutiny management, you know, to look at joint approaches. That'll be January the 12th. That's probably one day to avoid for the training, I think. And then April and May. Yeah, it was going on to next November for the year. And then just to fill you in, 2 weeks today, I've been invited to the East Midlands Audit Forum meeting, which we have had a couple of Teams meetings to date. Basically inaugural meetings is an in-person meeting at Leicester Museum on the 28th, so I'll be attending that and report back from there. Okay. I think that then concludes my comment on the work programme. So we have the work programme for approval. Do you have that proposed and seconded? Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. So I think that concludes our meeting this morning. Thank you to everybody and for everybody's contributions. Wish you all a safe journey home if you're going home, or a productive day for the rest of the day. Thank you.